name's Dave Costello. I am 51, soon to be 52 years old, and I live, eat, breathe baseball. It is my favorite sport. No doubt about it. What I like most about it is, well, everything, for one thing. I like the linear fashion of it. You go from first base, second base, third base. Every infield is the same dimension. 60 feet, 6 inches from the mound to home plate. 90 feet between each base. 9 players. It's one of the few sports where the defense has the ball. I think it's pretty cool. I used to be a catcher. I love that. Nothing funner than see a pitcher dominate a team. Steve Carlton, Warren Spahn. You ever see his numbers against the Cardinals? I think he had 60 victories against the Cardinals. He must have been sick of seeing him. The only thing better than baseball is talking about it. Is looking at stats. The greatest website of all time is baseballreference.com. Yes. It is, we were going to use it a lot tonight. It has every stat on earth. And I love talking baseball stats. But the problem is this. Baseball stats are ruining the game. Because they're focusing on the wrong stats. There was a ruling in the Supreme Court about, pardon my language, pornography. It was, they said that the Supreme Court justices said, I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it. Well, I know a good baseball player when I see it. Some stats will indicate it, but I know it when I see it. Mike Trout is a wonderful, wonderful baseball player. Drafted, I think, in the 29th position or 30th position, so the Phillies could have had him. Mickey Moniak's going to save the day, don't worry. I'm a bitter Phillies fan, too. So, baseball likes to identify who is the best. We have a pantheon of great players. From Walter Johnson, to Ty Cobb, to Babe Ruth, all the way through Hank Aaron, which I named my son after. My son Henry is named after Henry Aaron. My favorite baseball player of all time is not a Philly. I met him at the Thanksgiving Day parade the year of the bicentennial. He was the grandmaster, and I shook his hand. It was nice being friends with the Fitzpatricks. When Emmett Fitzpatrick was the DA of Philadelphia, we got a backseat to meet Hank Aaron. It was pretty cool. But the greatest debate we have is, who's the best player of all time? Now, if I ask you guys, who's the best player of all time? What would you say?
Ruth.
Ruth? Okay. Anybody else?
Cobb.
Cobb. Great choices.
Ted Williams.
Ted Williams, miserable man.
Stan Musial.
Stan Musial, Stan the man. He had equal number of home runs, home and away. That's an amazing stat. He didn't benefit from a home park. He's not Todd Helton playing in Colorado, getting 65 doubles at home and 5 on the road. Well, how about, what if I put this to you? Babe Ruth played in a segregated league. Lou Gehrig played only day games and on the East Coast. Is that an unfair advantage? I would say certainly. Does that skew his numbers? I would say it should. Does WAR, wins above replacement, reflect that? No. It doesn't take things into context. It doesn't say where you are in the batting order. In 1961, Roger Maris hit 61 home runs. He had 91 walks. He had 0 intentional walks. 0. Barry Bonds once had 200 walks in a season, almost all of them were intentional. He used to joke when he played the Phillies, he'd point to Jim Fregosi and just put up 4, because that's all he's going to see. Stats now don't take into context where you bat, in the order, who's batting behind you, what your stadium is, all these things, the plethora of things that impact how good you are as a baseball player. It tries to take into account, but it really doesn't. So what I want to do is start off with 1966. It's going to be a little tough to read, I apologize, I can make that bigger, but just know that Frank Robinson in 1966 hit the Triple Crown. He led the league in batting average, home runs, and RBIs. The pitching Triple Crown is wins, strikeouts, and ERA. Carlton did it in 72. It's real difficult to do. You get rewarded for it. He was a unanimous choice. He got all 20 first place votes. Frank Robinson was the king of baseball in 1966. Undoubtedly, everyone could see he was the best player in baseball. Who could argue with a Triple Crown winner? Well, here's an interesting fact. It's hard to see. The top 3 players were all Baltimore Orioles. 4, 5, and 6 were all Minnesota Twins. So they picked the teams that win divisions too.
Plus, it was his first year in the American League.
Yeah, well, that was a dumb trade too. It wasn't for Milt Pappas. Here's what WAR says. Now, if you look at this, the number 1 WAR, win above replacement, in that year was Juan Marichal. Interestingly, 1 through 7 are all National League players. 2 of them are Phillies, so we must have been great in 66, weren't we? No. But we have 2 guys in the top 10 in WAR. And there's Frank Robinson as 9th. But look at that. There's someone on top of him in the American League. That player must be fantastic. To have a higher win above replacement than Frank Robinson getting a Triple Crown. Well, let's look at his stats and see just how good he is. His name is Mud, as far as I'm concerned. Let's go 1966 AL WAR. MLB. We'll just do a Google search over here. AL MLB WAR 1966. Here we go. If we look at wins above replacement, let's look at Wilson, who was equal to Frank Robinson. Earl Wilson, a very good pitcher.
Also a good hitter.
In 1966, he played for 2 teams. He went 18-11 total with a 3.07 earned run average, 264 innings pitched, gave us 214 hits, 74 walks. His whip, walks and hits per inning pitch, was above 1. He came in 14th place in the MVP. Do those numbers scream out to you that they were as good as Frank Robinson's 1966 Triple Crown campaign? He didn't have an ERA above 3. Now you might say, a lot of that's outside of his control if his fielders aren't good. Well, let's look at his whip. He gives up a walk or a hit every inning. 74 walks. Let's see what his strikeouts are. 200. Nolan Ryan once had 373 a year. To put it in perspective, no one should be sure to compare to him. It's unfair. But those stats, according to wins above replacement, are equal to Frank Robinson's Triple Crown. You might look at that and say, that's ridiculous. How could that possibly be? It's because how they calculate WAR, what they say is good and bad, and the fictional players they compare them to. And I'm not kidding. They compare players to, oftentimes, to a fictional player. They give judgment based upon fielding prowess. They give extra points to shortstops, 8 points. This statistical wonderkind that's trying to measure how great a player is takes exceptions all over the place. So if you look at this, Frank Robinson is the #1 offensive WAR. Dick Allen was second, 8.3. Dick Allen was 7.5 overall. What does that tell you about his fielding prowess? He was an Iron Glove, according to the measurements. Frank Robinson, 7.7 versus 8.9. They're saying he can't field. You ever heard of that? It's one of my slides. I'll replay it a little bit. That saying that says Ozzie Smith used to save 1 run a game. It was fielding. My response to that always was, prove it. How many errors lead to a run? A lot of the things, a lot of the judgments they have based upon who was good and who was not are based upon judgment, just like a call in a game, whether it's a hit or an error. And we use that as the basis for who was the best player. So, look, wrong way. How do we calculate WAR? Oh, wait till you see this. It is fun. It is as clear as mud. You do it in 2 different ways. Here's the rules for position players. That's my sister-in-law Joanne's wishing me good luck. Okay, it starts off here, position player WAR calculations in detail. Takes into account batting runs, base running runs, runs added or lost due to grounding into double plays and double play situations, fielding runs, positional adjustment runs, replacement runs. It goes on and 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 on. Oh, goodness sake. I'm getting my fingers scrolling down so much. Now the thought is, this is the measure of a good baseball player. A good baseball player will not necessarily care if they strike out as long as they get on base. As long as they get extra base hits, a strikeout's okay. Who remembers a player named Rob Deere? Rob Deere was all or nothing. He was a poor man's Dave Kingman. He would get 30 home runs and 200 strikeouts. Reynolds for the Diamondbacks now. 3 straight years, 200 strikeouts. Their WAR, though, was very good. Their WAR was, they get 30 home runs, they're knocking in 90, 80 runs a year. Let's reward that. Let's say that is a good number. And it is my contention that the focus on compiling stats, the compiling numbers of baseball, is ruining the game. That the game we see now is not as good as the game we saw 10 years ago. So let's look at this WAR calculation. It says replacement level. WAR is supposed to measure how many more wins you will get based upon a replacement player. Someone comes into your position, you're not there, how many fewer wins will your team get? That would be an amazingly good stat to have, wouldn't it? You could pick your lineup pretty easily. Wally Pipp. Who remembers Wally Pipp? Wally Pipp lost his job because he went the weekend off, and Lou Gehrig played close to 2,000 games in a row. Wally Pipp had a WAR of 3.4 the year before Lou Gehrig took over. That's a positive. That's positive. He was winning 3.4 games more than his replacement. Well, his replacement was Lou Gehrig. I think that was a fair replacement. Now, it might seem unfair, but let's think about it. The average player in an era sometimes has inflated stats. Rogers Hornsby had a 5-year stretch in a row where he averaged in total 400. A 5-year stretch. We haven't had a 400 hitter since 1941 when Ted Williams batted 406. Tony Gwynn came close in 94 when he batted .393, I think, that we had to strike. Haven't done it once. He did it 5 years in a row. Cy Young has 511 victories. Walter Johnson has over 400. Why is baseball the only sport, statistically speaking, where the players have gotten worse over the years? Where they were so much better back then, their WAR would indicate it. Their WAR says Babe Ruth is the greatest player of all time. He had 714 home runs, he had 2,000 RBIs, 2,000 runs scored, he had a .342 batting average. He is the greatest of all time. No one comes close to that, unless you took steroids. Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa. My favorite stat on Sosa was he hit his 400th home run and his 500th home run in consecutive seasons. It took Schmidt about 3 years to do that, from his 400th to his 500th. He had 60 home runs 3 straight years. This stat says those players are better. This stat says Babe Ruth is the greatest player of all time. I gave you my reasons for why he's not. Segregated league, day games, East Coast, 154 games. It's just to say that everybody back then is better than everybody now is ridiculous. But if you look at wins above replacement, it does say that. I'm going to show you a nifty little stat on Pedro Martinez, and what many people consider to be the greatest baseball season ever, and how his win above replacement was the highest in the league, but how it really is a misleading stat for how good he was. So, look at how WAR is calculated. Current values per 1,350 innings played are catcher gets +9 runs, shortstop +7 runs, second baseman +3 runs, first baseman -9, 5 runs, DH -15 runs. What they're saying is, what do you contribute to the game based upon how good of a fielder you are and how good of a hitter you are? It's a noble contention to try to identify who's contributing to the game and who will win on both sides of it, when you're batting and when you're fielding. A couple of years ago, many years ago actually, about 15 years ago, Mo Vaughn and A-Rod were finalists for the MVP. No, it wasn't Mo Vaughn, was it? Oh gosh, I forgot who it was, but A-Rod got it because he played the field. It wasn't Mo Vaughn, I forget who it was. But they gave it to A-Rod because he played the field, because the thought was, he's in the field, the other guy was a DH. It was Ortiz, I'm sorry. They wanted to give it to the guy who fielded. I put this out there earlier. How many errors lead to a run scored, on average? No one knows. It's a stat I couldn't find. We can find stats on everything conceivable, everything possible. I couldn't find that one. It used to be that baseball stadiums would sometimes mow the grass short for guys who could bunt, and keep the grass long for teams that couldn't field. Were those guys good fielders then because the groundskeeper made them a good fielder? No. But the stats would say, yeah, they are. Because they had however number of attempts and the same fielding percentage. Ozzie Smith and Larry Bowa have the same fielding percentage of all time, .980, but Smith got to a lot more attempts, so they say he saved the run game. Malarkey. So let's give a real brief explanation for it. There are 3 categories of variables computed to generate a player's WAR. One is hitting proficiency. These measures include batting average, runs batted in, and on-base percentage. The second category is a player's speed, derived by the success at stealing bases, getting on base via infield singles or errors, going from first to third, and tagging up on outfield flies. The third variable category is a player's defensive ranking, which are estimates of his ability to prevent the opponent from scoring runs. These include a judgment of a fielder's range, the strength of his throwing arm, and the percentage of physical and mental errors. Example, throwing to the wrong base. For many of these measures, a player's numbers are compared with the league average. How do you measure a mental error? Adubel Herrera, the knucklehead that he was and the criminal that he is, made a mental error every game, it seemed. How do you measure the impact of his mental errors on leading to a Phillies loss? It's difficult to quantify. WAR tries to quantify everything, and look what it measures: batting average, runs batted in, and on base percentage. What's the problem to me is, you look at batting average, on base percentage includes that. It's a double counting stat. Your on base percentage is how often you get on base, hits and walks. Batting average is how often you get on base without walks. So they're saying measure it based upon batting average and measure it based upon on base percentage. So it double counts the stat. That alone makes it misleading. It's based upon judgment of the strength of his throwing arm. David Concepcion used to be a shortstop for the Reds. He used that AstroTurf in Cincinnati, and he'd bounce a ball off the turf, and it would bounce into the chest of the first baseman because he couldn't reach over there. His arm wasn't very strong, but he got it there. Is that less effective than Gary Templeton's gun of an arm? It would fly off into right field sometimes. This is where it gets a little hairy for me because they use judgment. That page of stats for WAR wanted to show the detailed calculations they have to show how great a player is. But throughout it, it's all judgment calls compared to a fictional player. Add 8 points to a shortstop because their shortstops have a difficult position. So I say this to you. Did Ozzie Smith really save 1 run a game? That's the notion. To me, Ozzie Smith, and this is going on YouTube, so I'm going to be officially saying this for the world. Ozzie Smith is the most overrated player of all time. Ozzie Smith is the most overrated player of all time. And I say, how many slick fielding, slap hitting shortstops with an average of about 260 have there been in Major League Baseball history? I'd say pretty much every shortstop. They're all pretty good fielding players. They're all, they get there because of their glove. They don't get there because of their hitting. If you're a good hitting shortstop, you win MVP. You're Cal Ripken or you're A-Rod. Now you might say, Dave, you're overreacting. You're overreacting about Ozzie Smith. No one says he's that good. Well, let's see. Let's look up all with cumulative WAR. And we'll see where he ranks. And it's a wonderfully amazing stat. Let's look at the top 10. Barry Bonds is number 1. I'll make this a little bigger. I made it too big, I think. Here we go. Number 1. Barry Bonds, the most lovable, fun player of all time. Then every player after this is players who played primarily in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. But where does old Ozzie Smith show up? 44th. According to Cumulative WAR, he is the 44th greatest player of all time. He is better than Paul Molitor. He is almost as good as Joe DiMaggio. He is better than Johnny Bench. I toss this out to you. You're starting your team, all-time team, and you get to choose by position. And you haven't chosen your shortstop yet and your catcher yet. And you have those 2 guys out there. Whom do you choose, Johnny Bench or Ozzie Smith? Johnny Bench. But according to these stats, this is cumulative, by the way, so it's a cumulative number. He's a better player. He has a higher impact on his team than Johnny Bench did in his 145 RBIs. The one I love the most, it's way down the list. It's in the 300s. This one bugged me to no end. Doug DeCinces. He's 304. He's right above Placido Polanco, which I think is really funny. The thousands of baseball players of all time, they have good old Doug DeCinces as a 304th greatest player of all time. He was a good player. He was solid. He was a compiler. He stuck around and got stats. But these stats are being rewarded, and now they're being used to measure how good a team is and who to put out there.
How far does that list go? The one you just showed.
Let's see. Pretty far. You see the 1,000th greatest players of all time? Hey, Milt Thompson. Frank Thomas, the Big Hurt, is 999. Milt Thompson's better than him. We all knew that, right? Okay. This is one I wanted to show you. Pedro Martinez, in 2000, was the AL MVP and Cy Young Award winner. His WAR was 11.7, was the highest in the league. Look at the bottom numbers. He had 284 strikeouts in 217 innings pitched. He had 32 walks in 217 innings pitched. His ERA was 1.74. He had 4 shutouts. He had 14 hit batters, which he always pitched inside, which I loved about him. His whip was .737. So everything in italics, he led the league in. So home runs per 9, only .7. Walks per 9, 1.3 didn't lead. Strikeouts per 9, 11.8. Strikeout per walk, 8.8. Where it gets truly amazing is the fact that the second best ERA in that year was Roger Clemens in the American League, and his was 3.7. So the best was 1.74, and Clemens was second at 3.7. Only 5 pitchers in the American League had an ERA below 4. 5, and he was below 2. The average runs per game was 5.3 for all MLB. Boston's average was 4.89. So with his unbelievably great numbers, Boston still stunk. His whip was .74, the best in Major League Baseball history. The best in history. Walks and hits per innings pitched. The best in history. The Major League average for 2000 was 1.490. His was .74. So while I say 11.7 is accurate, it's not the greatest of all time. Good old Pud Galvin had a 20.5. Dwight Gooden had a 12.2 in 1985.
Pretty damn good.
He averaged 3.5 runs more, or better, fewer, than the rest of the league. If WAR is supposed to say, how good are you and how much do you lose when you're replaced, if you replace Pedro Martinez at every one of those starts, you're giving up 3.5 more runs. How could his WAR then be 11.7? He had 29 starts. Shouldn't it be 29? Every start he was in, if you replaced him with an average pitcher that year, you gave up 3.5 more runs. But according to WAR, he's not even in the top 10 all time. He's not even in the top 20 for pitchers. I'm hemming and hawing about wins above replacement because it is used right now to measure who is great and who is not. And it's used right now as the basis for who plays and who does not. Maybe 11.7 is correct. But how could he possibly be 9 fewer than Pud Galvin's 20.5 in 1884 when he was 3.5 runs better than the rest of the league. According to that stat, Pedro only added 11.7 wins above his replacement, even though his replacement was terrible.
What about his 99 season?
They say that's almost as good, but this one's better for comparatively speaking to the rest of the league. 90s, he had won 20 games, and this one he did not win 20, won 18. Let's look at his.
I was curious, like Bob Gibson's 1968 year.
Well, take that into context. What did Bob Gibson and Denny McClain benefit from that year?
Higher mound.
A mound that was 5 foot tall. Denny McClain's the last 30-game winner. Shockingly, Bob Gibson went 21-12 or 21-11 with a 1.12 ERA in 1968. 1.12, or 21-9.
I think like 15 shutouts.
Yeah, how do you lose 9 times when you give up 1 run a game? I would just slap my teammates if they did that. But that doesn't take that into context, does it? That WAR stat for Bob Gibson in 1968 is one of the greatest of all time. But he played on a mound that was much, much higher. Denny McClain wins 31 games on that same mound. They lower the mound, no one wins 30 games again.
Was that the only mound that high that year? Do you
Every
know?
league's mound had the same height.
No.
To me, the proof's in the pudding. Wins above replacement. How many wins do you get when you're out of the game? And how many wins do you get when you're in it? Mike Trout, the king of wins above replacement. The Angels have an identical record when he's in the game and when he's not. Over 2 years, they were 4 games under 500, both times when Trout was playing and Trout was not. If this is supposed to reflect how many more wins you get when you're in the lineup, I would think it would be kind of close. Maybe it wouldn't be 10.5 for Mickey Mantle, but it would be kind of close. I put the 1961 stats up because Mantle was number 1 at 10.5. Roger Maris was 6th in hitting. He had 61 home runs that year. He had 140 RBIs. He had an on-base percentage of .367, and that's 7.0 for his hitting WAR. It doesn't take into account where you bat and who it's behind you. It doesn't take into account baseball park dimensions or weather. Who remembers the old Candlestick Park? When the wind was kicking up. I remember the Count of Montefusco getting blown off the mound. I went to a ball game, it was the most miserable 9 innings I ever saw. It was just freezing cold. Are those players not as good, comparatively speaking, because they play in that park? Mel Ott, 500 home runs for his career, 300 of them were in the Polo Grounds. The right field line was 290 feet long. You just pop those things down the right field line, and suddenly he's one of the greatest home run hitters of all time. WAR doesn't work because it is a silly stat. If someone gets a single every game for 162 games, and another person gets a single every game for 162 games but knocks in somebody, the 162 RBI guy is the greatest player of all time. They're essentially doing the same thing. It's just situational. Who's on base, who's hitting behind you, and that doesn't take that into account. So, this is where my rant's going to start, if I wasn't ranting before. Are stats killing baseball? WAR, the end-all and be-all stats, says strikeouts aren't bad. Home runs are great. I bring you the stats of Joey Gallo. Joey Gallo had an OPS of 869. He struck out 196 times. His on-base percentage was .333. His batting average was .209. He had 41 home runs with 85 runs and 80 RBIs. The next year, Joey Gallo, that he had a WAR of 3.3. 3.3. So they're saying he, with his .209 batting average and his striking out 196 times, created 3.3 wins for over his replacement. The following year, the juggernaut that he was, he struck out 207 times. His on-base percentage was .312. His batting average was .206. He had 40 home runs with 82 runs and 92 RBIs. He had a positive WAR. According to how we measure a baseball player now, what we think is a good baseball player now, he had good years. He hit home runs, he cleared the bases, he effectively knocked people in. Who cares if he struck out 200 times? Who cares if 1/3 of the times he didn't get the ball in play? He's hitting home runs. He's scoring runs. Who cares if his on-base percentage is .312? We have a manager of the Phillies right now. God bless him. He's in over his head. He talks of launch angle and trajectory, speed of the bat. I love Charlie Manuel's response. Do you know anything about launch angle? He says, yeah, I do. Just swing, kind of get it up there, it goes over the fence. For me, slugging percentage and on-base percentage really tell you the whole story. There are better, it's two stats. Who knows what slugging percentage is? What is slugging percentage?
Total bases divided by at-bats.
Yep. What is on-base percentage?
Hits and walks.
It's hits and walks. It's batting average plus if you count for walks. Right? If you have OPS, on-base percentage, and slugging percentage, isn't that a good measure of how good of a hitter you are? Here's Mike Trout's stats. His OPS, the ones that are in black are the ones where he led the league. He had an OPS over 1,000. Over 1,000 when he combined his slugging percentage and on-base percentage. 1.071, 1.08, 1.078, 0.991. Isn't that a better measure of how good of a baseball player he is, rather than launch angle, speed of the bat, compared to a fictional player, which makes Ozzie Smith greater than Joe DiMaggio? Right now, we have a league of Joey Gallos. We have a league that says clear the bases, hit home runs, strikeouts are okay. Schmitty would strike out a ton, but his on-base percentage was off the charts. To me, the most effective measure of a good baseball player is how many bases you generate, how often you're on base. Everything else is situational. Roger Maris had 0 intentional walks in 1961 because Mickey Mantle was batting behind him. Does that make him a better hitter? No, they were afraid to pitch to Mickey Mantle. That is situational. But when everything comes out in the wash, on-base percentage and slugging percentage measure how you are as a hitter. Can anybody think of a flaw in using on-base percentage and slugging percentage? I can only think of one. Stolen bases. Rickey Henderson had a .278 batting average for his career, but a .405 on-base percentage. And then when he got on, he'd steal second, he'd steal third. That, to me, if you can add those steals to your slugging percentage, then I think it becomes a more meaningful stat. That's the only thing I can think you could add to it, because I know we're worried the base stealers. Doug DeCinces is not the 303rd greatest player of all time. Frank Thomas is not the 998th best player of all time. We have a league of Joey Gallos, when we really should have a league of Mike Trouts. Guys who get on base and guys who get extra base hits. Schmidt had 548 home runs. He had 2,600 hits. He got on base a ton. He walked a lot. The problem with the league of Joey Gallos is MLB attendance is down 4 straight years. 4 straight years. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy to me that guys who get walked are the good players. Schmidt would get 100 walks a year. Rhys Hoskins got 100 walks. He's the first player since Pat Burrell did it in 2009, or 2008, I think it was. Walks get you on base. Home runs supposedly bring fans into the stands. We're hitting more home runs than we ever have, and attendance is down for the 4th straight year. This is a business we're talking about. I'm not even talking about the quality of the game. I think the quality of the game is not nearly as good as it was before because there are no rallies. It's not as fun to watch. It's just me. I'm an old man saying it. I did it better back in my day. But if it's a business, 4 straight years. Batting average is the lowest number since 1972. The lowest since 1972 because teams stress right now uppercut swings because they go over the fence, speed of your bat, hit home runs, and don't worry about strikeouts. If this is a business, they're terrible businessmen and women. Who could forget Mark Schott? She was a...
How about spike ball that we're talking about now?
Well, yeah, it's ball. Basically,
As far as bringing that.
it's basically a golf ball they're hitting.
Yeah.
I'll toss this out to you. I wanted to have the final, so it's working out kind of perfectly, actually. I wanted to have the final 15 minutes be a discussion. If the league is stressing these Joey Gallo stats right now, and they are, Rhys Hoskins is in the lineup every night because he hits 30 home runs. He'll get 95 RBIs. He may strike out 170 times, but hey, who cares? We're in first place, right? Oh, no, we're not. We're 2.5 games out of the final wild card. No, we lost 2 in a row, didn't we? Oh, you're right. You mean this is not working out? Jose Altuve had a lower WAR than Judge from the Yankees. Altuve is a stolen base machine with power. He's 3 foot tall, and he dominates a game. But according to the compiling stats that WAR admires, Judge is a better player. Now, you might say, I could take either one. I wouldn't cry if they were both on my team. But to say one is definitively better than the other is kind of ridiculous when one wins a World Series. Mike Trout, God bless him, his numbers are fantastic. His wins above replacement are 0, literally. When he's in the lineup, he's not in the lineup, it doesn't matter. They win just as many games. When the Phillies were in their heyday in 2008, Ryan Howard would say, "Get me to the plate, boys." And in August and September, he'd knock in every run he could possibly knock in, have 148 RBIs, and we win a World Series. We would have won another one if they didn't start Pedro Martinez in Game 6, but that's a different story. Still mad about that. When he's throwing 83 miles per hour at his fastball in warm-ups, don't put him out there. What can we do right now? Well, answer it. Do you think the state of the game is good?
No.
No, it's boring, isn't it?
It's been boring.
I love a pitcher's duel. I love seeing good pitchers dominate. But when Hector Neris is mowing them down, that's not good pitchers dominating. It's just players swinging for the fences and missing entirely. And I can say definitively and quantitatively, attendance is down 4 straight years. So the product they're putting out, people don't want to see it. Phillies attendance is up because we signed Harper. What does Harper do? Gets on base, gets extra base hits, gets doubles and home runs. His OPS is great. His batting average is 265-ish, like Schmidt's used to be. Get on base a lot, knock him in, get extra base hits. That's a measure of how good you are. What would you do right now if you were the GM of Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Phillies, besides fire the manager? Would you change the way the lineup is set up? I would. We're not winning games.
Go back to playing small ball.
Yes. Yes, this notion now in baseball is that stolen bases are bad because you get caught 30% of the time. That's true, no doubt, it's true. But 70% of the time, you turn a single into a double.
Situational managing and hitting.
Exactly, exactly. When we do things exclusively by the numbers, when they have an iPad out and they're saying what this guy does against left-handed hitters when we have a quarter moon and wind is 2 miles per hour out of the east. I love having Charlie Manuel as our batting instructor now. Just go up there and hit. It's hitting season. Well, what would you do then to improve the game? Situational hitting, small ball. That's definitely one thing. Who remembers the Cardinals from '82? Tommy Herr had 110 RBIs and 8 home runs. You could be effective. They had Vince Coleman and Willie McGee running all over the base path, turning singles into doubles and doubles into triples. And they won a World Series. They beat the Brewers. What else would you do? What do you think is a good, effective way to improve the game? Because right now we have a league of Joey Gallo's.
Better hitters. You get a 3-0 count, you gotta take a pitch, especially when like these walk two people ahead of them.
Oh, that drives you bananas.
Instead of going up and swinging at the first pitch.
Well, Charlie would say be aggressive, though.
Well, if you see a pitch, there's no argument for that, but generally, you should hold it. The way they're hitting doesn't make sense anymore.
How about pitching?
Stop the robot managing of 5 or 6 innings and bring in the bullpen.
Who's the last pitcher to pitch 300 innings in a season? Steve Carlton, 1982.
In the entire major leagues or just the Phillies?
Entire major leagues.
Wow.
Last player to pitch 300 innings was Steve Carlton. Right now, we do everything by the book. And unless you have great players, your by-the-book strategy will never work. The Dodgers win a ton of games. You know why? They have unbelievably talented players. The Phillies don't win a game. Why? Because our second best player is Rhys Hoskins, and he wouldn't start on the Dodgers. And he wouldn't start on the Astros.
Now, what do you think about the Astros?
I think they did it the right way. I think they did it through the draft, for one thing. They had wonderful drafts, which we don't have. But they'll steal bases. They'll hit for power. They have guys on that team that will steal bases. And they're 30 games over 500 right now.
You need to hit and run, to run and hit.
Yeah, absolutely. Advance a runner.
Yeah.
This notion now, I think war is not killing baseball. I think Brad Pitt did. With the movie Moneyball. You hit 390 in this zone and 260 in this zone. And when they don't ever bunt and don't ever steal a base, they forgot one thing. They lost to the Yankees because the Yankees had better players. All those stats they use to make yourself a better team work when you have a team full of great players. The Astros can do it. The Dodgers can do it. The Indians can do it. The Rays can do it. We can't. Because our second best player is Rhys Hoskins, and he's not that good. So I toss this out to you. If baseball wants to have more fans, if they want to have more people in the seats and not become the third most popular sport, because basketball is rocketing up, they have to do something. Yes,
You're not gonna like what I'm gonna say.
then don't say.
They gotta shorten the season.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
It's game of summer. It starts in cold weather, it ends in cold weather. Come September, people aren't interested, they want football.
Go back to 154.
Yeah,
That's
it
easy.
should start Memorial Day. Season should
And
end
Labor Day?
and start the playoffs then. You should not be playing baseball Halloween. And people have short attention spans, they're tired of it, it's too long.
They were
a
playing
season.
baseball in November.
Yeah, it's too long, people don't,
Snowflakes, yeah.
yeah.
I remember in '79 when the Pirates played the Orioles and Stargell hit that home run and the snow's falling down on them.
That's
The
not
four coaches, you ever
baseball.
seen it in the stand?
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
Yeah,
people lose interest.
But the owners-
Short attention spans.
What are the odds of the owners doing that?
No, no.
No.
Slim and none and
That's
slim and
why when
slipped
they have
down.
those double headers, they're split double headers.
Don't you think more people would go if they lose interest, it's too long?
Sure, it's supply and demand. I teach economics too. When supply drops, the price goes up, the owners can make more money.
Right.
But
I would make it mandatory that every home team have 2 legitimate doubleheaders scheduled every year.
I
Or
can't,
not split, back-to-back games.
I can't remember when the last scheduled doubleheader was.
Right.
And they're always split doubleheaders. So they don't really care. I guess they care about the fans because they want to get the money from them, but they're not putting out a good product for them, for sure. Yes?
One of the independent leagues, might be the Atlantic League, is doing a lot of interesting things this year.
That's-
Balls and strikes are not called by the umpire behind home plate. They're called by a machine up to the booth to get them right.
Right.
Is that right? I'm not so sure about that, but.
I think the Orioles and with Levon Hernandez getting the strikes 2 foot off the plate in that playoff game, they would have loved to have seen it that
Yeah.
day, when Eric Gregg was calling them.
I think a pitcher has to pitch to at least, maybe, I don't know what it is, say 3 batters.
Major League, the relief pitchers, that's gonna be a rule in Major League
Yeah,
Baseball
next year, they are to need to face at
Well,
least 2 batters, I think it is.
If you're a relief pitcher coming in
Yeah.
before 2 outs, you have to face 3 batters.
And
That'll change things,
limit
Sure
the
will.
limit the number of times anybody can go to the mound.
which they're doing.
They
now.
do, they are enforced.
Right.
Well, another thing the independent league's doing that's very interesting, and they're gonna be playing ball in Lancaster until the end of this month, because they don't start until May, is you can steal first base. If a
Doesn't
ball,
happen very often.
listen, it's interesting to watch. If a ball gets past the catcher, and just say there's nobody on base, wild pitch or pass ball, if you think you can make it to first, you run. And it's made the game very interesting. Obviously, it's never gonna go into Major League Baseball, but it's an interesting way to watch a game.
How about this, with the DH in both leagues? It's been around since 1971. Can't say it's going away. We have Hall of Famers who were exclusively DH players,
Finally, yeah, Edgar Ortiz,
and Big Papi.
he will be, yeah.
He will be, for sure. Is that an option to generate hitting? Is a home run inherently better than a double? I don't know, but I think a strikeout is inherently worse than a single.
And a triple is the most exciting play in baseball.
It's supposed to be, yeah. It's supposed to be.
And you were talking about Ricky Henderson. I remember reading a thing about him. If you look at his stats, the first couple of years he was in the league, he had a lot of triples. Then he realized that if he stopped at second base, instead of running for a triple, he could steal third and add to
Yeah.
his stolen base count. So that's why his triples always went down after his first two years.
These Moneyball stats would say, don't steal third, because you get caught 30% of the time.
Right.
He got caught 20% of the time. But he stole 120 in each season, so
But he was a selfish player.
I think he's the greatest leadoff hitter of all time.
He was also selfish.
He looked good in the Phillies uniform.
How about better mascots?
Well, we can't top this, the fanatic. I just tossed this out because these stats that they admire right now, these compiling stats, home runs, RBIs, but not on base percentage, are killing the game. no one's showing up. Attendance is down. If they want to have winning teams, that will work when you have winning players.
They've made it like a fantasy league,
Yeah,
is what it's become, and it's.
absolutely.
It's not a game of strategy, just, and picking your moments like managers would, you get a gut feeling. And
Yeah, there's no, I'm not saying that's not the best thing to have a gut feeling, because Charlie had a gut feeling that Pedro was gonna pitch well in game 6 and had a little indigestion that night. But, yeah, it takes strategy out too, because they're just doing everything by what a computer-generated model says, and does not look at the situation truly, who's batting behind you. Who remembers in 1980, when Schmidt hit the home run against the Expos to win a division? Who was on deck? Was McCormick?
Dan McCormick.
Dan McCormick. Mike McCormick's the Phillies. He used to go pitcher.
Stan Bonson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had a dud on deck and they pitched to Schmidt. That's a manager who didn't know the situation. These stats don't take into account who's hitting behind you, who's hitting in front of you, how effectively they get on base, how many pitches you see. It's just compiling stats, and it just says home runs win games, because it's the most effective way of knocking in a run. You can never be out when you hit a home run. You hit a double, you can get caught stealing. Yes.
I'm a baseball fan, but I'll be honest with you, this is I finally know what WAR is, because I hadn't known what that was until tonight. And I'm not much of a stat guy, but how long has this been around? And who sits down and comes up with all these?
Well, the biggest problem with WAR is there's not a single definition of it.
It was Bill James, all right.
Bill James started the whole revolution. He doesn't like WAR. He thinks it's a flawed stat.
When did that start? When?
I mean, the statistician with baseball, it's been morphing since the 80s. WAR is probably became powerful in the last 10 years.
The gentleman who started baseball reference.com, and he started the other ones, was a professor at St. Joe's, Sean Foreman.
Really?
Yeah.
Bill James wrote his baseball abstract when he was working as a security guard at night because he was bored to tears and he loved baseball. He became an assistant GM for the Red Sox and they won their World Series. And everyone says, look, the stat guy, that's why they won it. No! They won it because they had great players. They had fantastic pitching. That's why they won. Not because of some statistical model, but because Pedro Martinez is pitching 4 shutout innings in relief in a playoff game a day after he started the game. Great players win games, not statistical strategies. And my contention is the product we put out now is abysmal, and fans don't want to see it, and attendance is down.
And so what does MLB do?
They juice the ball.
Juice the ball.
They make Joey Gallo more powerful.
Yeah.
And they put out uniforms like they did 2 weekends ago that are made the game unwatchable.
I had no idea.
The white ones and the black ones. Yeah, the game was unwatchable.
I was watching the game, I didn't know who the Phillies were.
Yeah, you looked at highlights, it could have been any of the 15 games being played.
It looked like every baseball game you see in a movie when they say Major League Baseball is playing in 2045 and the Cubs win their first World Series. And they always have these goofy uniforms. It looked like that. So I wasn't sure what they were trying to get, but
They were terrible.
yeah, they were awful.
How do you feel about when they get into throwback uniforms?
All depends. I don't ever want to see the Indians wear those solid red ones. They were abysmal.
I was there back in August when the Phillies wore the burgundies. They could keep those back.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan. I like the pinstripes. Give me pinstripes.
Well, the first time they burned them,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that seemed like a reasonable thing to do.
I agree. I agree. It's a game I love. Baseball is my favorite sport. It's my kid's favorite sport. It's great when I can shape young minds in my house. And to me, the game is not nearly as good as it was 10 years ago. And the proof's in the pudding. Attendance is down. And Mike Trout doesn't generate one win more when he's in the lineup when he's not. Yes,
I read you're a professor. Do you get to teach any of this stuff?
I teach stat. I do, I teach statistics.
Where at?
At, well, it's now Jefferson University. It was Philadelphia University, and it was Textile. If we don't change our name every 3 years, we get antsy. Any other comments or questions? Go to see a ball game, boo as loudly as you want. It's your God-given right as an American to boo bad baseball. There's nothing wrong with that, and we have the worst manager in the league. I will close with that. Thanks, guys.